"Let my mother go and I'll put you on your feet," said the 12-year-old boy, his firm voice echoing through the courtroom like a shot in the silence. Judge William Carter, paralyzed for 8 years after a car accident, stopped leafing through the documents and looked up in disbelief. Kevin Washington's impossible promise crossed the room like a bomb about to explode. Laughter immediately erupted. The prosecutors exchanged mocking glances. Reporters whispered among themselves as if watching a cheap comedy. "That kid has lost his mind," murmured a woman in the gallery, shaking her head. "Poor thing. Poverty makes children unstable." Kevin Washington was there because his mother, Deborah, was facing false charges of embezzlement. She had worked as a janitor in the courthouse for 15 years. She knew every corner of that building, every face, every secret whispered in the hallways. The accusation was simple. $50,000 had disappeared from the administrative safe, and the poor black woman was the obvious suspect. The boy was only 12, but his eyes carried a disturbing maturity. While everyone laughed at his impossible promise, he calmly observed each person in the room, memorizing faces, cataloging reactions. He was not a desperate boy begging for mercy. He was someone who had seen enough of the world's cruelty to know exactly what he was doing. "Boy," Judge Carter said sharply, "this is a serious court, not a circus. Your mother is guilty and will be convicted. There are no miracles here." More laughter echoed through the room. Kevin didn't look away for a second. "I know who stole the money," he said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "And I know how to prove it." The courtroom was silent for a few seconds before the laughter returned, even louder. "Then speak up, Sherlock Holmes from the suburbs," someone shouted from the back. Kevin smiled for the first time, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "First, you release my mother. Then I'll show you how you'll walk again." While everyone mocked the child who dared to challenge the system, no one noticed the small digital recorder hidden in his school backpack. No one noticed how his "Let my mother go and I'll put you on your feet," said the 12-year-old boy, his firm voice echoing through the courtroom like a shot in the silence. Judge William Carter, paralyzed for 8 years after a car accident, stopped leafing through the documents and looked up in disbelief. Kevin Washington's impossible promise crossed the room like a bomb about to explode. Laughter immediately erupted. The prosecutors exchanged mocking glances. Reporters whispered among themselves as if watching a cheap comedy. "That kid has lost his mind," murmured a woman in the gallery, shaking her head. "Poor thing. Poverty makes children unstable." Kevin Washington was there because his mother, Deborah, was facing false charges of embezzlement. She had worked as a janitor in the courthouse for 15 years. She knew every corner of that building, every face, every secret whispered in the hallways. The accusation was simple. $50,000 had disappeared from the administrative safe, and the poor black woman was the obvious suspect. The boy was only 12, but his eyes carried a disturbing maturity. While everyone laughed at his impossible promise, he calmly observed each person in the room, memorizing faces, cataloging reactions. He was not a desperate boy begging for mercy. He was someone who had seen enough of the world's cruelty to know exactly what he was doing. "Boy," Judge Carter said sharply, "this is a serious court, not a circus. Your mother is guilty and will be convicted. There are no miracles here." More laughter echoed through the room. Kevin didn't look away for a second. "I know who stole the money," he said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "And I know how to prove it." The courtroom was silent for a few seconds before the laughter returned, even louder. "Then speak up, Sherlock Holmes from the suburbs," someone shouted from the back. Kevin smiled for the first time, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "First, you release my mother. Then I'll show you how you'll walk again." While everyone mocked the child who dared to challenge the system, no one noticed the small digital recorder hidden in his school backpack. No one noticed how his eyes were fixed specifically on the judge's assistant, Thomas Mitchell, who had stopped laughing abruptly when Kevin mentioned knowing who stole the money.
And certainly, no one imagined that this 12-year-old boy had spent the last 6 months secretly investigating every person in that courtroom. If you're enjoying this story of courage and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what this boy was about to reveal would forever change the lives of everyone in that room. Judge Carter banged his gavel with excessive force, a sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. Silence. This court will not tolerate this kind of circus, he said coldly, his eyes fixed on Kevin with the contempt reserved for those he considered inferior. Boy, your mother is guilty of embezzlement. $50,000 disappeared from the administrative safe, and she had full access. Case closed. Kevin remained motionless, but his mind was working like a computer processing data. He watched as Thomas Mitchell, the judge's assistant, fidgeted nervously with his fingers on the table whenever money was mentioned. He noticed how the man avoided looking directly at Deborah Washington, his mother, who was crying silently in the dock. My mother has worked here for 15 years without a single complaint. Why would she steal now? The prosecutor, Mr. Davidson, laughed dismissively. Because you always steal when you have the opportunity. It's in your nature. The racist remark exploded through the room like a bomb. Some of those present shifted uncomfortably, but no one protested. Kevin felt the familiar burning of injustice rise in his chest, the same burning he had felt since he was 8 years old, when police searched his home for drugs that never existed, or when teachers assumed he cheated because boys like him couldn't be naturally intelligent. Deborah Washington worked 3 jobs to support her son alone. She was a janitor at the courthouse during the day, cleaned offices at night, and worked weekends at a laundromat. Kevin grew up practically on his own, but that made him observant, analytical, able to read people and situations with a precision that was disturbing for someone his age. Your Honor, said the defense attorney, clearly intimidated, I would like to request more time. Denied. Carter cut him off. The evidence is clear. Deborah Washington had access, opportunity, and motive. Poverty is always motive enough. More malicious laughter rippled through the room. Kevin watched Thomas Mitchell more closely. The man wore a new Rolex, too expensive for a court clerk's salary. His nails were perfectly manicured, and he drove a BMW that Kevin had seen in the parking lot. Details that a 12-year-old boy from the suburbs shouldn't notice, but someone accustomed to witnessing injustice learned to catalog automatically. What do you have to say in your defense? Asked Carter to Deborah, his voice laden with contempt. I've never stolen anything in my life, she murmured through her tears. I work honestly to support my son. Honestly? A black single janitor? Interesting definition of honesty. Kevin clenched his fists. At 12, he had already learned that the system wasn't designed for people like them. He had grown up watching his mother being humiliated, belittled, treated as invisible or suspicious. But he had also grown up watching, listening to conversations they thought he didn't understand, memorizing faces and patterns of behavior. My mother didn't steal that money, Kevin said again, this time louder, and I can prove it. The courtroom erupted in even crueler laughter. Sure you can, kid. With what evidence? Your childish drawings? Thomas Mitchell stopped fidgeting with his fingers. For a split second, his eyes met Kevin's, and Kevin saw something that confirmed his suspicions. Fear. Pure, genuine fear. It wasn't the fear of being unjustly accused, but the terror of someone with hidden secrets who realized another person might be discovering them. Judge Carter leaned forward, his face contorted into a cruel sneer. Pathetic boy. Do you think you can come here with your childish fantasies and change reality? Your mother is a thief, and you are the son of a thief. Accept it and save us all some time. Kevin took a deep breath and smiled again, that same smile that didn't reach his eyes. Okay, I'll prove my mother is innocent first. Then I'll show you how you'll walk again. The room fell silent for a few seconds before the laughter returned, even louder. Thomas Mitchell wasn't laughing. He stared at Kevin as if he were seeing a ghost, his hands now visibly trembling on the polished wooden table. each new humiliation only fueled something growing quietly inside Kevin, a cold determination his oppressors couldn't see. What those privileged people didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing its own sentence of defeat. And a 12-year-old boy was about to teach them that underestimating someone because of their color or origin is always a fatal mistake. The cruel laughter still echoed through the courtroom when Kevin did something no one expected. He smiled. Not the timid smile of an intimidated child, but something deliberate, calculated, almost too adult for a 12-year-old boy. Okay, I'll prove my mother is innocent first. Then I'll show you how you'll walk again. Judge Carter slammed his gavel violently. Enough of this nonsense. Guard, remove this kid before I charge him with contempt. But Kevin didn't move. 6 months, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. That's how long I've spent investigating every person in this courtroom. Thomas Mitchell stopped breathing for a second. What had been mere nervousness turned into visible panic.
For weeks, he had noticed something the adults had completely overlooked. The cameras in the vault hallway had blind spots, but the parking lot camera perfectly captured anyone entering or leaving the building after hours. Mr. Mitchell, Kevin said, locking eyes with the terrified man, do you remember the night of March 15th? It was a Friday, after hours. The cameras show you returning to the building at 11:47 p.m. Thomas Mitchell shot to his feet, knocking his chair to the floor. I need to go to the bathroom, he stammered. But at that moment, 2 federal agents appeared at the front door. Patricia had anticipated this. Mr. Mitchell, one of the agents said evenly, we need to talk about your recent financial activities. The look of panic on Mitchell's face confirmed everything Kevin had suspected during months of silent investigation. As Mitchell was escorted out under the stunned gaze of everyone in the courtroom, Kevin turned to Judge Carter. The once arrogant judge now looked like a completely different man, small, frightened, and confronted by the irrefutable proof that he had condemned an innocent woman. Do you still think my mother stole the money? Kevin asked quietly. For a moment, all eyes turned to the judge, waiting. And then something extraordinary began to happen in the room. It wasn't just justice being served. It was the power of truth, revealed by someone everyone had completely underestimated. A truth proving that intelligence and determination know no age, no color, and no social class. And sometimes, adults must learn from children what it truly means to fight for what is right. Judge Carter watched as Thomas Mitchell was led away by federal agents. And for the first time in 8 years, something other than paralysis left him completely immobile. Reality was crumbling around him like a house of cards. And at the center of it all was a 12-year-old boy he had completely underestimated. It's not over yet, Kevin said calmly, his eyes fixed on the judge. Patricia Williams opened a third folder, thicker than the previous 2. Kevin, show him what else you found. The boy took a deep breath and pulled a small worn laptop from his school backpack, connecting it to the courtroom sound system. Over the past 6 months, Kevin began, his voice echoing clearly through the silent room, I recorded everything, every conversation, every racist comment, every joke about my mother when you thought no one was listening. Carter's blood ran cold. The first recording began to play. The unmistakable voice of Prosecutor Davidson filled the speakers. Blacks always steal when they get the chance. It's in their nature. Immediately followed by Carter's knowing laugh. Exactly. That's why you don't even need to investigate much. We already know the outcome. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Reporters stood like predators catching the scent of blood. Cameras flashed. Davidson tried to rise to his feet, but Patricia raised a hand. There's more, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. Kevin clicked on the next file. Carter's own voice filled the courtroom. These black cases are always the same. Guilty until proven innocent. Saves the court time. Laughter followed. Davidson's and that of other officials. Especially single black women. They always make excuses. Carter's face turned crimson. He opened his mouth to speak, but Kevin didn't let him. This one is from last week. You remember it, don't you? You said, that kid thinks he can come here and play lawyer. The housekeeper's son trying to be smart. I'll show him his place. Each word was a dagger in Carter's reputation. The audience, who just hours earlier had laughed at the arrogant child, now stared at him in horror and disgust. Patricia seized the moment. These recordings have already been sent to the National Council of Magistrates, the national press, and the FBI. That was taken out of context. Private conversations. Kevin smiled with that same quiet confidence that had never left him. Do you want me to play the one where you said you were going to teach that arrogant black family a lesson? Davidson tried to hide behind his papers, but Kevin turned toward him next. Mr. Davidson, do you remember when you said, these blacks need to learn to stay in their place, otherwise society will fall apart? That was on April 3rd at 2:37 p.m. I have the exact timestamp. The destruction was methodical, merciless. 6 months of quiet preparation were unfolding like a symphony of justice. Kevin had documented not only conversations, but behaviors, biased decisions, prejudiced jokes, and a pattern of institutional racism now exposed for the entire world to see. Patricia rose solemnly. Your Honor, based on this overwhelming evidence of systemic racial bias and unethical conduct, I formally request not only the complete acquittal of Deborah Washington, but also the opening of a federal investigation against this court for civil rights violations. It was then that something extraordinary happened. As Judge Carter tried to process the magnitude of his downfall, a strange sensation rippled through his legs. First, a tingling, then a faint pressure. The extreme stress, the adrenaline, the shock. Something was awakening in his nervous system. Kevin watched carefully, and for the first time, his expression softened. Your Honor, he said gently, are you feeling something different? Carter looked down, incredulous. His toes moved inside his shoes, a movement he hadn't felt in 8 years. The room fell in stunned silence. Doctors would later say that rare cases of psychosomatic paralysis can reverse under extreme psychological stress. Others would call it coincidence. But at that moment, as Judge Carter slowly moved his legs for the first time in nearly a decade, everyone understood they were witnessing something beyond explanation. I told you I'd make you walk, Kevin murmured, but I never said it would be the way you expected. Carter tried to stand. His trembling legs obeyed, weakly, awkwardly, but they obeyed. When he finally managed to straighten up, leaning on the table for support, it wasn't triumph that filled the room. It was humiliation. Standing before a courtroom filled with cameras, Judge William Carter, once feared, now disgraced, had to face not only the loss of his career and reputation, but also the crushing truth that he had been completely defeated by the 12-year-old boy he once considered inferior. Kevin had fulfilled his impossible promise, but at a price Carter could never have imagined. Deborah Washington wept with relief in Patricia's arms. Kevin watched everything with the same calm he had shown from the very beginning. Not with arrogance, but with the serenity of someone who understood that when justice comes, it comes completely. The 12-year-old boy had taught grown men a lesson they would carry for the rest of their lives. Underestimating someone because of the color of their skin or their social background is always a fatal mistake. As the cameras recorded Carter taking his first steps in 8 years, steps that would lead him straight out of the judiciary and into social exile, a silent truth echoed through the room. Sometimes justice needs small hands and big hearts to manifest itself, and when that happens, even the impossible doesn't stay impossible for long. 6 months later, the courtroom where it all happened was unrecognizable. Judge William Carter had resigned the very next day. His racist recordings had been broadcast on every major news channel in the country. His now-found ability to walk again became a cruel irony. Now he could move, but he had nowhere to go. No law firm would hire him. His reputation was permanently destroyed. Thomas Mitchell was sentenced to 8 years in prison for embezzlement and money laundering. During the federal investigation, it was revealed that he had stolen more than $200,000 over 3 years to feed a gambling addiction that consumed his life. The BMW was confiscated, the house auctioned off, and his wife publicly filed for divorce, saying she could no longer look at him without feeling disgust. Prosecutor Davidson faced disciplinary proceedings from the Bar Association. Recordings of his racist comments became case studies in law schools across the country. Examples of institutional bias. He lost his license to practice law and was forced to move to another state, where he now works as an insurance salesman, avoiding eye contact with black customers out of sheer embarrassment. Kevin Washington, on the other hand, became a national sensation. His story was told in documentaries, television programs, and motivational conferences. Prestigious universities offered him full scholarships for when he finished high school. By the age of 12, he had already received offers to write a book about his experience. What impresses me the most, Patricia Williams said in a national interview, is that Kevin never acted out of revenge. He acted out of justice. There's a fundamental difference between destroying someone out of anger and exposing the truth to protect other innocent people. Patricia had become Kevin's mentor, teaching him about civil rights and legal strategy. Deborah Washington was promoted to administrative supervisor of the new court that replaced the previous one. Her story of perseverance and integrity made her a symbol of resistance. I worked in that place for 15 years, being treated as invisible. Today, my son has taught me that visibility is not something we give to us, it's something we take when we stand up for what is right. The most profound transformation, however, took place in the city's judicial system itself. Kevin's recordings forced a complete overhaul of hiring and supervision practices. Security cameras with audio were installed in every courtroom, and mandatory training on racial bias became a requirement for all employees. Kevin even created a YouTube channel called Justice at 12, where he teaches other children about their rights and how to document injustices. Don't wait until you grow up to fight for what is right. Injustice has no age, so neither should the fight against it. A year after the events, Kevin appeared on the country's most watched television network. "How did you know you could prove your mother's innocence?" asked the host. Kevin smiled, the same calm smile he had worn throughout the trial. "I didn't know if I could, but I knew I had to try. My mother taught me that when you see injustice, you have two choices: accept it or fight it. Accepting it was never an option.